Thanks everyone for joining us, and for those who celebrated Christmas, Merry Christmas. I hope you had a wonderful holiday period. I want to start today with something that might make some of you uncomfortable, but it's really important. If you're a college senior applying to a deferred program, which is our topic for today's discussion, there's about 90% chance you are making the same critical mistakes that get otherwise really qualified candidates rejected every single year. And I say this because I see it all the time. What makes it particularly frustrating for me as a coach is that those decisions aren't really about stats. It's not about your GPA or your GMAT scores or even your internships. Those things matter, obviously, but what I'm talking about is something more fundamental to an application to deferred program. It's about how you're thinking about your entire application. And most applicants who are going through this process think about it inaccurately in the context of how you're presenting your story. I've been doing this for many years now, and I can spot these mistakes reading the first paragraph of many essays. It's really, really that common. So today I'm going to show you what actually happens, why it matters, and what you need to understand to position yourself properly. So let's dig in. Before we go further, I need you to understand what you're up against as a deferred MBA candidate. This is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You get one application window as an undergraduate student to apply. So if you don't get in, you cannot reapply to a deferred program. You can apply to these schools later as a traditional MBA candidate, but that's a completely different process and different criteria in terms of evaluation. Now, let's talk about numbers, because I want you to see how competitive this really is. Harvard's 2+2 has about 5% admission rate, Stanford's about 6%, Wharton's about 7%. These are some of the most selective programs in graduate business school education. And there are about 13 programs that offer the deferred offering. What makes it even more challenging is that the baseline standards are incredibly high. The average admit student has a GPA between 3.7 and 3.9 out of a 4.0 scale. And the average GMAT from a classic GMAT score perspective is 730 to 750 range. The individuals have internships from Goldman, from McKinsey, from Google, and any other really high-profile, top-tier firm that you can imagine. They've held significant leadership positions on campus, president of major organization, and not just members. So if you say, oh, I've done all these memberships, but I haven't really contributed, this is for you. You want to stick around. Also, 98% of admitted students have already secured a full-time position or a full-time position for their post-undergraduate career before they even apply to the deferred program. And most candidates who apply to these programs meet these standards. If you have a 3.8 GPA and a 740 classic GMAT score, and you had a summer internship at Morgan Stanley, you're absolutely qualified. But so are almost every other candidate who is in that pool with you. Those numbers get you your application noticed, but they don't get you admitted. What gets you admitted is how you present yourself, the narrative you build, how you position your experiences, the way you demonstrate that you're not just another high-achieving college senior, but someone who's already exhibited the markers of a future leader. And this is where most otherwise strong candidates completely miss the mark. They think, I have the stats, I have the internship, I have the campus leadership, I should be competitive. And they are competitive on paper, but then they write essays that sound like college essays or in your college application. They present their experiences the way they presented them to get into their undergraduate institution. And they wonder why programs with a 5% acceptance rate passed on them. Your one shot at these programs requires understanding what they're actually evaluating beyond the numbers and If you're here, I'm assuming, that's really what you want to know. So that's what we're going to cover today. So let's talk about what fundamentally changed between your undergraduate application and what you're doing now as a deferred MBA candidate, because I think this is where most of the confusion happens. I hear so often, I'm going to do the same thing I did in undergraduate. It worked then. It could work now. So 4 years ago, when you applied to college, admission committees wanted to understand who you are as a person. They're looking at your character, your values, and your intellectual curiosity. They wanted to know about your fundamental experiences. Maybe it was a family situation that shaped your worldview, or a moment when you discovered a passion or a challenge that taught you resilience. That stuff mattered because they were investing in your potential over 4 years of growth and development. Deferred programs are asking completely different questions. They're not asking who you are as a person in the same personal, introspective way the college admission team looked at. They're asking, can you identify business problems that others miss? Do you already show signs of being able to influence outcomes and mobilize resources? How will you create value in organizations you join? Think about what these programs are doing. Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. They're making a bet on you. And that you, someone with maybe 1 or 2 internships and no full-time work experience, are worth admitting to a program where the average student has 5 years of professional experience. That is a massive bet. And they're not making it because you seem like a nice person with good values. They're making it because they see evidence that you think and operate differently than a typical college senior. This is the fundamental shift that most candidates really never make. They write essays that would be perfect for a college application, deeply personal, reflective, focused on growth and self-discovery. And those essays get rejected from schools that have a 5 to 7% acceptance rate. Your job is to present yourself through the lens these programs are actually using to assess you, not who you were or who you're becoming, but evidence of how you already operate as a college senior. That is a completely different narrative challenge that you have to overcome in the context of your application. So if they are not evaluating you the way college admission did, what are they actually looking for? I want to give you a framework for understanding this, because once you see it, everything about how you should position yourself becomes clear. And we'll talk through about, okay, what can you do if it's not clear for your specific case? So there are 4 key signals that deferred MBA programs are assessing. And I want to emphasize, these are not things you say you want to develop. These are things you need to demonstrate and illustrate you already have. First, your professional instinct. This is about whether you naturally think the way strong business leaders think. When you walk into a situation, do you instinctively identify inefficiencies, opportunities, risks? Do you think about stakeholders and trade-offs without being told to do so? Do you ask the kinds of questions that experienced professionals ask, even if it's elementary at this stage? Some people develop these instincts through internships, some through running organizations on campus, some through family businesses. The point is, by the time you're applying to these programs, you need to show you have them. Second, influence without authority. At 22, no one expects you to manage large teams, but they want to see that you figured out how to get things done even when you don't have formal power. How do you build coalitions? How do you get people to listen to your ideas? How do you navigate resistance? This is about demonstrating that you can drive outcomes through influence, not just through your position. Third, trajectory and momentum. These programs are making a bet on your future. They need to see that you are on an upward path. This isn't about getting progressively better internships, though that absolutely matters. It's about showing increased sophistication in how you think, growing scope in what you've taken on, bigger impact in what you deliver. They want to see acceleration and not just steady progress. And fourth, communication strengths. What applicants don't realize is by the time you apply to these programs, especially if you've done a consulting or banking internship, you should have started developing a different style of communication, not academic writing, not personal narrative, but the kind of structure that is clear communication that you see in professional environments. When you can't demonstrate that in your essays, it's a signal that you haven't really internalized professional norms yet. Now, I don't mean talk in jargon. I mean in clear communication in terms of how you present ideas. Now, the hard part is that you can't just say that you have these qualities. You have to demonstrate them through how you present your experiences, how you structure your thinking, how you communicate your goals. And that requires a level of narrative sophistication that most 22-year-olds simply haven't developed yet. Not because they're not smart or capable, because they are, but because they haven't had enough exposure to that professional environment to know what this looks like in real life. And this is where expertise makes a difference. We definitely know exactly what signals these programs are looking for, and we are able to point those out immediately, and then help you position your genuine experiences to demonstrate that you have these skill sets. So let's show you how this looks like in practice, because this is where the rubber meets the road. I'm going to show you two ways to describe the same consulting internship, but present it from a different lens. One that approaches it as you would have in a college essay, and another one as you should as a deferred candidate. So the first version, as a college applicant, my consulting internship taught me the value of teamwork and client services. Working alongside senior consultants, I learned to appreciate diverse perspective and develop my analytical skills. That's a college application language. It's focused on what you've learned, the soft skills you've developed, how you grew. It's reflective and personal, and it would be great for an undergraduate application, but it's absolutely terrible for a deferred MBA. The second version reads like, during my consulting internship, I identified 2 million cost and efficiency in our client supply chain. I built the quantitative framework, aligned stakeholders across 3 departments, and presented recommendations that shifted their procurement strategy. That's definitely a deferred MBA language. Notice what changed. It leads with a problem you identified. It specifies the impact. It shows you building frameworks, aligning stakeholders, influencing decisions. It positions you as someone who creates value, not someone who is learning how to operate in a professional setting. Now, what's important is that both of these could be describing the exact same internship. The question is, which one demonstrates the 4 signals I just talked about? Which one shows professional instinct, influence capabilities, and communication skills? These language shifts sound subtle, but it completely changes how the admission committee perceives you. One makes you sound like a college student who had a really good internship, and that's totally fine. But if you want to compete at the deferred program, the other one helps you sound like someone who's already operating at a different level than what is a typical college student. And what's the most frustrating part is that most candidates don't see this until it's too late in the process, because that's how they're taught to actually write. They write version 1 because you have written it that way. They get great feedback from college counselors who tell them it's a strong essay, and then they get rejected because they're being evaluated against an entirely different standard than college. This isn't about inflating your experiences or exaggerating what you did. It's about understanding what lens the admission committee is using and presenting your genuine experiences through that lens. Every single experience in your application needs this kind of positioning, and getting it right across your essays, your resume, your letters of recommendation That's a level of execution that requires real expertise and obviously time to do it effectively. So let me give you the framework we use at CA Admissions when we work with deferred candidates. The three-layered narrative architecture is how we think about structuring not just your essays, but your entire application. So layer one is your professional foundation. This is where you establish what you already have, the core capabilities that mark you as someone who will succeed in business environment. Every example you choose, every story you tell, every experience you highlight should be building this foundation. You're not showing that you're eager to learn. You're showing that you already operate differently than most college seniors. Layer two is trajectory signals. Remember, these programs are making a bet on your future. They need to see that you are on an upward path. This isn't just about having a progressively better internship, though that definitely helps. It's about demonstrating increasing sophistication in how you think, growing scope in what you take on, and bigger impact in what you deliver. These need to be clearly communicated in a clear story of acceleration and momentum across your entire application. And layer three is clarity. This is about connecting the dots between where you've been, where you are, and where you're going, and why an MBA is the right next step. Not vague goals about exploring industries or learning about different fields. A clear, logical narrative that makes the admission committee understand exactly why you need an MBA, why you need it through a deferred program, and why you need it from their specific school. What's critical about this framework is that these three layers need to work together across your entire application. Your essays should reinforce them. Your resume should reflect them. Your recommenders should emphasize them. And the way you talk in interviews should demonstrate them or illustrate them. When all of this is aligned, you create a coherent and credible application. And when different parts of your application are telling different stories, you create confusion and doubt, which doesn't make the admission committee for the deferred program say, yes, we need this person. Building this is quite complex. It requires understanding how to position experiences strategically, which details to emphasize and which to minimize, how to create narrative momentum across different application components. This is honestly where most people and most applicants struggle. They understand the concept when they hear it explained, but translating their own experiences effectively, that's where expertise makes a huge difference. So I want to talk about the specific mistakes that many applicants struggle with that leads to rejection, because if you take nothing else from today's session, from today's discussion, understanding these 5 things could save you your one shot at a deferred program. So mistake number 1 is learning focused language. Every time you write, this taught me, or I learned, or I discovered the importance of, you're positioning yourself as a student, not as a professional. And it's nothing wrong to be a student, but you are applying to business school. So you have to present yourself as a professional. That linguistic difference matters more than you think. Students learn, professionals identify problems and drive solution. Mistake number 2 is vague future goals. I want to explore social impact, or I'm interested in learning about different industries. This sounds like you don't know what you want. Now, I understand that at 22, you might not have your entire career figured out, and that's totally fine. But your application needs to demonstrate strategic clarity and conviction in what you want to do. You need to know why you want an MBA. You can absolutely pivot during business school, but your narrative needs to show you've thought deeply about where you can create impact and why. Mistake number 2, resume style experience listing. A lot of candidates present their backgrounds like a resume. Here's the internship 1, here's internship 2, here's my leadership role. but there's no connective tissue, no story of progression. These programs need to see trajectory, and that requires internal narrative construction across everything that you are choosing to present. Mistake number 4 is generic school positioning. I cannot tell you how many applicants we see that say something like, I will figure out what makes these schools different when I get admitted, which is what they chose to do when they wrote their applications for college. Or Harvard's case method and collaborative culture aligns with my learning style. Okay, fine, but you could swap Harvard with Stanford or Wharton or Booth, and you can still almost use the same language. These programs can tell when you're being generic, and they want to understand why you specifically fit them specifically. And that requires deep understanding of what makes each program genuinely different. And mistake number 5, weak recommender framing. Most candidates ask professors or internship supervisors for recommendations, and they get letters that talk about academic performance and work ethic. Those are fine qualities, but they don't tell the Deferred MBA committee what they need to hear about you. Your recommenders need to speak to your professional judgment, your influence capabilities, your business instincts. And most candidates never guide their recommenders on what to emphasize. Look, most candidates we see who have competitive stats, right? So what I talked about earlier, 3.8 GPA, 740 GMAT Classic, Goldman internships, most of them are making at least 3 of these mistakes, and some of them are making all 5. And that's why they get rejected despite having profiles that look perfect on paper. The challenge is you often can't see these mistakes in your own work. You are too close to it. You don't know what these programs' evaluation frameworks look like, and you haven't seen enough applications to understand what differentiation looks like at this level of competition. Let me be realistic with you about why this is genuinely hard to do on your own. First, you have limited professional experience to work with. Someone applying with 5 years of work experience has multiple jobs, projects, teams, measurable results to draw from. You might have 2 internships and some campus activities. That means every single example you choose has to work much harder. You can't afford to waste any of them on stories that don't demonstrate the right signals. Second, there's no clear template to follow. Traditional MBA application advice is built for people with 4 to 6 years of work experience. That advice doesn't translate to a 22-year-old. You're working with different constraints and different evaluation criteria, and there simply isn't as much good evidence out there for deferred candidates. And third, most college seniors haven't developed professional communication sophistication yet. And that's not a criticism, it's really just a reality. You learn how to communicate with strategic framing by working in a professional environment. If you had 1 summer at a consulting or bank, you might have started developing these skills, but translating that into written form across essays, resume, and recommendation requires capabilities that take time to develop. And fourth, the margin of error is basically 0. We're talking at 5 to 7% acceptance rate. 1 positioning mistake in your essay can be the difference between admission and rejection. And there's no room to be good but not great. You need to be operating at an exceptionally high level across every element of your application. And fifth, you have to manage school-specific complexities while maintaining a coherent overall story. You need different perspectives for Harvard versus Stanford versus Wharton, but you can't contradict yourself or sound like you're being whatever each school wants to see. The balancing act requires real strategic thinking. None of this means you can't do it on your own. Some people do, but it does mean that having someone who knows exactly what these programs are looking for, how to position your specific profile, how to build narrative structure that works, and how to avoid fatal mistakes, that expertise makes a significant difference in your probability of being admitted. This is your one shot, once in a lifetime shot at getting into a deferred program. You can still again apply to an MBA program later when you have 4 to 6 years of work experience. The question here is whether you want to take that shot alone or with someone who has done it successfully many times before. So let me tell you how we work with deferred candidates, because I know some of you are thinking about whether you want support with this process. When you work with C Admission, we start with strategic profile evaluation. We look at your background, your experiences, your goals, and we help you think through which of these deferred programs are genuinely the best fit for you. A lot of candidates apply to all 10 schools, 13 schools, without really understanding which one aligns with their specific profile and objectives. We help you be strategic about where to invest your time and capital. Then we work on narrative development using that 3-layer architecture I talked about earlier. We take your actual experiences and we figure out how to position them to demonstrate professional instinct, influence capabilities, and strategic orientation. We're not making up experiences you don't have. We do not do that. We're positioning what you do have in the way that shows what these programs are evaluating. We then develop school-specific essay strategies because, as we discussed, Harvard looks for different things than Stanford, than Wharton. We help you differentiate your positioning across programs while maintaining a coherent overall story so you are not confused. We work on resume and recommendation positioning because these elements need to reinforce the same narrative as your essays. And your resume should reflect professional trajectory, not just a list of activities that you have worked on. And your recommenders need to understand what to emphasize: business judgment and influence capabilities, not just academic performance. And if you get to interviews, we do extreme comprehensive preparation because the way you talk about your experiences need to reflect the same strategic framing as your application. We do many mock interviews. We teach you frameworks for structuring answers. We practice until you can communicate at the level these programs expect. If you're interested in working with us, the next step is to schedule a consultation through our website, and we'll talk through your profile, your target schools, your timeline, and how we can help you build the strongest possible application for your one shot in the program. I also want to mention that if you're not ready for full comprehensive support, we also offer a profile evaluation option. That can be a good starting point if you want professional assessment of where you stand and what you should focus on without necessarily committing to a 30-minute conversation. Look, some of you are going to do this on your own, and that's totally, totally fine. But if you do, please take serious what we covered in today's session and watch this video again. The college application mindset will hurt your chances. These programs are evaluating you through a completely different lens, and your job is to demonstrate professional capabilities, not potential to learn. But if you want expertise helping you position your profile strategically, avoid the mistakes that I mentioned, and build a narrative that actually works for this 5 to 7% acceptance rate kind of program, we do this every application cycle. We know exactly what these schools are looking for, and our results reflect that. So thank you for being here. I'm going to answer one question just so I make sure that I have a Q&A portion. But we are going to end the session after that. So let's see if we have any questions that came in live. Okay, let's go with the questions that have come through the registration. Does being an international candidate currently studying at the University of Oxford in the UK with a preparatory high school education in France introduce different considerations? Nope, no different considerations. You are still being evaluated against, the same pillars of evaluation I talked about earlier. What you are bringing to the table that's very unique is different perspectives of learning styles that can add value to your application, but doesn't automatically apply if you can't communicate it effectively in the written form of your application. So I strongly encourage you to, yes, leverage that, but make sure you do it in a way that is going to help you, in making yourself, in presenting you as someone who is going to be a value add to the cohort. All right. Again, if you want a profile evaluation, in a written form profile evaluation, please go to our website, cadmissions.com, request a profile evaluation. Try to include the resume because it helps me, because I personally review these, and it helps me see what experiences you've had. And that way I can give you a more concrete feedback in your profile. Next week, we're going to talk about, we're going to move to MBA candidates. So those who are, the traditional candidates, and we're going to talk about what happens after you submit your MBA application. And that will be Friday also, just because of the holidays. And then after that, we're going to revert back to our usual Thursday sessions. Thank you for watching and have a happy new year. And I will see you next week. Hi, I'm Susan Berishaj, founder of Admissions. If you'd like to go deeper into MBA strategy, watch the next video here. And if you want more insights on building a standout application, click here to subscribe.